to another episode of Let's Talk Talent. This is a show where we get to sit down with some of the experts and we discuss a variety of topics around talent optimization. Today, we're joined by Alex Viale, the Director of Product Management here at the Predictive Index. Alex, thanks for joining.
Hey Josh, thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, today we're going to talk about a topic that can kind of be tough for new managers or just anyone in general. It's tough because you have to be okay with letting some things go. You can't have full control all the time as a manager. And so what we're talking about today is how to build autonomous teams. Now, as a product manager, or in your case, Alex, as the director of a number of product managers, I can only imagine that this is something that you either constantly are struggling with or just is at the forefront of your mind when you're dealing with your team. But that being said, before we actually talk about how do we get there or dive too deep into this, let's just first define what this looks like. So, Alex, in your opinion, what does an autonomous team look like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Josh. It's a great question. An autonomous team for me is a team that I can trust, and I think the business leaders would trust to take a hard problem, make smart decisions toward business goals, be transparent about it, and drive it to done without great concern for checking in constantly. And they're are empowered to make their own decisions toward that ultimate goal. So I think a couple of key components of that are, allowing the teams to understand the goals or for the business or the product area. I think that's like absolutely critical. Otherwise, they can't be autonomous. They're going to have to check in constantly.
Hmm.
Um, and then, they need to understand or being able to have a clarity of roles and responsibilities so that they can be empowered to make decisions or know where to get those decisions.
Right.
And then I think comes down to trust, but you know, level of transparency and communication. So providing updates so that people that may want to check in and ask how's it going or maybe worried about it, all those concerns are quelled by that kind of communication.
Yeah, from my side, I mean, when I'm thinking about an autonomous, just from an individual's perspective, I am very much on the side of I want to have that autonomy. I want to have that ability or that control where I get to make a lot of those decisions and I'm not just being forced or shoved into a box then being said like, "Hey, you have to do it exactly this way." So I think it it needs to be something that I think is on the minds of leaders of just how much or how involved the team really wants to be, right?
Yep.
And going into that, I think I gave a little bit of it, but I want to hear from you. Why does it even matter? What is this autonomy? What do we need a team to be autonomous for? Why is it important?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question again. I think of three things there. Teams can feel and will be in fact paralyzed without some level of autonomy, so they'll need to feel like they need to run decisions by someone else constantly, and that will really cripple progress. So that's
Right.
one thing. um, you know a negative aspect of a team not having autonomy is that senior leaders aren't afforded the opportunity to get out of the day to day and to be able to have that opportunity to think more strategically around the business, and constantly getting sucked into the details or checking in. And then I think lastly, most importantly, teams can lose morale, feeling they lack control, they lack the decision making capability, they can get frustrated, results in low engagement and potential turnover. So a lot of negative effects if the team's not feeling some level of autonomy.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Like I said, I'm on the side of team autonomy, whatever that means. But I have been in those situations, right, where you have this leader who kind of just says this is how it is and there is no other way. And it's debilitating. It's to the point where there's been times where I've left a company just because I feel like I don't like what value am I bringing personally
Sure.
if I'm not actually getting to make any of those decisions or get to try out new things that I think would be valuable or creative that can lead a new way for the team, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sure many can understand that extreme side. I'm sure there's a bunch of people who have had that in their past, or if not, they can kind of get a feel for what that might look like. But we want our teams to be autonomous, right? But at the same time, even though I'm harping so much about team autonomy, I can only imagine that there would be a flip side to this, right? And I wonder if there's a thing as giving members too much autonomy, because yes, it's great to allow them that decision or that freedom, but at the same time, I can imagine that there would be concerns. So if there is an issue, or if that is the case, how does a leader find that right balance?
Yeah. Yeah, if you figure out the right answer, I would love to know, Josh. That's a tricky one. I mean, I think I'm in software and product, so I think about customer value, features, functionality, screens, and things like that. So,
Mhm.
just as an example, as a leader, you don't want to be in the details of like what a screen works looks like, what a workflow looks like, what a button says, things like that. Like the team should absolutely be owning those level of decisions. And
Right.
if you're into that level, there's problems. But there's a whole other level of decision making that um, you can try to help the team understand their span of control, whether example like if a decision impacts the way we price and package something,
Mhm.
or the way we deliver a workshop, or it needs a great amount of cross-functional stakeholder collaboration internal to the business. There's a different level of decision there um, that the senior leader may not be comfortable allowing the team to make on their own, but also the team might not feel very comfortable or you know have the right information to make those decisions. So
Right.
I think helping the team in whatever way possible to understand that span of control is something along the lines of getting toward a balance there.
Right. No, I think that makes sense. But I want to dive a little bit deeper on that, just because I wonder, how do you know what the right, or maybe not that way, but how do you know what that span of control should be for your team? Is it, obviously it's going to be a case by case basis, right? But
Mm.
how do you assess that? Is this something as blunt as just asking your team, do you feel comfortable making this decision or doing this? Is it something where you go to the senior leaders and you say, is this something that they can take care of? Like, what does that look like, I guess?
Yeah, good question. I think there's some of that you can try to answer up front if there's a project kicking off, and you can have a collective session of brainstorm of like what are the things that we might run into as far as decision making,
Mhm.
and collectively divvy out roles and responsibilities there. But more often than not, I find that things come up in the middle of the work, in the workflow, and so um, trying to afford teams an opportunity, an avenue to raise questions. Hey, can I just run with this, or do I need to get this reviewed? So, kind of providing a channel for expedited information flow, I think,
Right.
can kind of help alleviate that.
Okay, that's a good way to do it. I My next question generally is about, as a leader, and I think this is why a lot of people struggle with this, or a lot of people, especially who are new, struggle with this, is that idea that you want to have control of this because you always know what your intentions are, right?
Mm,
You always understand where you're aligned and the values that are driving you, but you might not always understand that for your other team members, or you might not always understand that they're aligned with you. Maybe there is some misalignment, right? There's that fear of misalignment. So
sure.
what can leaders do to ensure that those autonomous teams, or just individuals in general, what can they do so that they can stay aligned to what's most important to the team, but still allow them that flexibility?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to trying to provide a vision as best you possibly can as a leader, understanding and sharing the why, and that's super critical. So, why are we doing this? What's the business driver? What's the business goal? If teams understand that and they can articulate that in their own words to someone else, that's a long way toward shared vision.
Mhm.
Even if get how to get there and the screens and the details are implemented differently, I think getting toward that goal is that's the big alignment. That's where you really want to be aligned. So clarity of vision, clarity of goals, maybe key performance indicators that you can even agree on. Are we making progress toward that? And then providing that, allowing the team, encouraging the team to provide that transparency. So how are we progressing? How is it going? Continually providing those updates. And then the alignment is kind of the worry goes away if you have that transparency.
Right. So it's all about making sure that they're comfortable with that game plan that's set. And I,
Yeah.
I can imagine that that must be very challenging to do, or to know. Kind of diving a little bit deeper on that, is there a good way or something that you use personally in your experience where you've been able to assess that level of alignment? Obviously it's one thing to say like, here's our game plan, this is step one, step two, go at it how you wish. But how do you really get that feeling that your team is aligned with you, and that you can for more or less trust that, hey, they've got it, I can take a step back, I can worry about those more higher level things, I don't need to worry about that day-to-day thing because I know they understand that full picture.
Yeah. I think honestly, check-ins once in a while we have here at PI anyway. We have daily stand-ups where we kind of get readouts of how things are progressing, questions that might come up. So that's maybe an example of the avenue of communication that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
Um, and then every quarter or so, we have a bigger stakeholder alignment toward what are we working on, what's coming down the pipe, things like that. So it's more of a, I guess, a higher level alignment there. Um, to the extent we can keep the communication lines open, I think that's just that's the key.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. It's just finding those ways to really connect and make sure that, hey, even if it's just a check in, just be like, we still good? Everything's okay? Just to make sure that, all right, we're on the same page. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great, or whatever you say.
Yeah.
But basically, just making sure that, hey, we're all on the same page. Awesome. Let's get back to what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, also very similar to finding that right balance, but also going deeper because I just want to keep getting more from you. How does this change the dynamics of a leader? There's obviously the leader who is very on top of things, like you said, that's taking so much time kind of in the weeds of things.
Hmm.
But if you're not doing that, you even mentioned having some of that time for higher level activities or more of those strategic things. So, when a team's being led in this more autonomous way, what are the main responsibilities of the leader for that team? And are there any vast differences or changes based on, say, someone who's leading an autonomous team versus one that's not?
Yeah. Honestly, I did try to give that some thought. I don't see the responsibilities as vastly different, Josh. I think, as a leader, you still should be helping the teams understand the business goals, providing areas of ownership to the extent possible, understanding span of control, roles and responsibilities, and making the team aware of how often you feel comfortable checking in on things. And so I think those are going to be key ingredients for a manager in either case.
Hmm.
Um, and I think trust is a real key ingredient to autonomous teams. And so if the senior leader doesn't have that trust built yet with a team, um, maybe there's incremental steps you can provide teams, smaller projects or narrow scope things to help them build the credibility, to build the trust, gain trust in their decision making before taking on bigger projects that have a bigger impact. Um,
Right. Yeah, I
uh,
really I really like that example because we talked about trust in a previous episode with Drew. And I think that's a great type of way to do this in a more realistic approach, just
mm,
because giving someone that smaller project that might, setting them up so if someone was to fail, like, this is the moment where you can fail, right? It's not
mhm,
giving someone that crazy monumental, this is the project to end all projects, go at it, see if you get it right, let's all be autonomous. You can't just go from one day being like, I want my team to be led in a very strict way, to then totally free to, yep, do whatever you want. Like, it just
yeah,
can't move that quickly. So it's finding avenues to say, okay, I want you to take on just this one part of a project, or I want you to take on
exactly.
this smaller project, and I'm going to see how you do and give you that freedom to say, like, hey, you're in charge of it. Like,
Yeah,
come to me if you need help, but I want you to try and see how you think this should be handled.
yeah, exactly, Josh. That's exactly the way I see it too.
Okay, so especially here at PI, we're always thinking about how certain people are more behaviorally prepared for roles, how their responsibilities will fit with a certain person better. So I wonder, especially going in this whole finding that right balance thing, I
Yeah,
think that the people play a level in this as well. I think
sure.
that, if there are certain people that have different personalities, maybe they don't want to be autonomous. Maybe
Mhm.
some people want to be more autonomous, right? So the main question that I have is about your opinion on this. Just do you feel that there are people who might be more led, just behaviorally speaking, to be ready or willing for that autonomous type of team versus others? And if so, how do you make sure those members are managed to their full potential, right? How do we make sure that this person who wants to be autonomous and this person who might not want as much autonomy are being managed in a similar way, not a really a similar way, but in different ways so that they get both best of both worlds, right? They get what they're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I work with folks with different personality profiles, so to speak, as well. So it's something I've had to think about. And in PI speak, I think of our A and D factors. A is dominance and collaboration, and D is formality. And so I think of someone who is highly collaborative may want to maybe not be the decision maker all the time. They have
Mhm.
a tendency to want to pull other people in and be um, you know connect with several people and to form a collaborative decision. So that can be maybe a bit of a struggle in some cases. And so, um,
Right.
for folks like that, we want to allow for that collaboration, maybe within their immediate team, and provide that autonomy with that immediate team, but not necessarily up and across others that need to be pulled in on a day to day basis. Um, the other part of it is our D factor, our formality factor that folks may want structure. And so for folks that really want a structure, and all of a sudden you say, hey, you know what, you're the decision maker, decide all these things, have at it. That can feel a little bit scary, maybe. And
Right.
so trying to provide someone like that a little bit of structure, right, for that, even within an autonomous team where they're going to be making decisions to say, hey, we have shared goals, we've documented those, we have um, clear key performance indicators that we've reviewed, and those are captured, and we're going to have these check-ins, and so it provides some level of structure and formality, even though we're saying you own the reins. And so
Right.
those are some of the things I've thought about.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. For me personally, I think that I'm generally on that boat of I would want, like, I even said it, I want that autonomy, but I do want that level of security at the same
Mm,
time
yeah.
because I have, I'm one person. I don't want to be the one, at least me personally, the one who just says like, this is it, we're doing it. I want someone in the team, and I think that's really where that level comes to play of how do you handle multiple people on a team? Well, let's make it kind of a team think
Mhm.
sort of aspect. So, you can say that this person who really wants that autonomy, hey, maybe you have more of a push of that final decision, but maybe the person who doesn't, you are the person who gets people in the room together and starts talking about like, okay, let's bring all these ideas together. Cause that's more of my pull is like, I want to sit in a room, get the three, four, five, however many people are on my team, and pull all the information from them, kind of hear it out from every side, and say like, okay, what are we gonna do? What's the
Yeah,
next step? Right? Is I'm more of that like the person to push others to try and get what's the best idea, and then say like someone else can be like, yep, that's it, let's do it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
And you made me think about another thing is some people are more or less comfortable with risk than others, and so
Yeah.
for those that may be more risk averse, kind of encouraging that person to fail but learn from that. Small failures. If we fail 9 times but succeed one, and we learn from it, ultimately it's a success. So
Right.
just trying to encourage that, and maybe with these smaller bite-sized projects to begin with, can kind of help maybe. So
Yeah. That's an awesome way to do it. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
that was a lot of fun, Josh. Thanks.